Kevin Haney is a civil engineer and the president and CEO of Colliers Engineering Design, a 1,900-person, fast-growing AE firm. In this first episode of the Civil Engineering CEO, Kevin is going to tell us what 2 traits he believes all civil engineers must possess. He's also going to talk about tech in the civil engineering industry. He's going to cover how remote work is going to affect our industry moving forward and how AE firms should try to handle it best. And lastly, he's going to talk about why he doesn't read and what he does instead. So before I dive in with Kevin, a quick word from our sponsor, BigTime.
Oh my God, this is amazing. I love it.
Got it. Wow, Dave, this is amazing. This is really, really cool.
The software is great. I love this program.
These are the real reactions of BigTime customers when they first toured the software. BigTime gives engineering firms the visibility they need to operate more efficiently and maximize profits. From project creation to client payments, BigTime streamlines operations with intuitive budgeting, project management, and invoicing solutions. Schedule your tour of the #1 rated professional services automation software at bigtime.net. All right, now I'd like to welcome on our guest for today, Kevin Haney. Kevin is a licensed professional engineer, and he's the president and chief executive officer for Colliers Engineering Design, formerly Mazer Consulting. Kevin, welcome to the Civil Engineering CEO.
Thanks, Anthony. Pleasure to be here.
So it's great to have you on the show. I want to just kind of start off by telling us a little bit about Colliers, where you're located and what services they offer, about how many employees you have.
Sure. So Colliers Engineering and Design, we'll refer to it as CED because Colliers Engineering Design is too long. Just keep saying over and over again. But we are headquartered here in New Jersey, remembering that the base of Colliers Engineering was Mazer Consulting. So our headquarters and stuff stayed the same. So we're here in Red Bank, New Jersey. Now CED's total company-wide, we are about 1,900 employees in about 63 offices. All throughout the country, heavily on the East Coast, down to Florida, around to Texas, up to Colorado, kind of
Wow.
is where our most physical presence is. And we just acquired a company called Bergman. And up until we acquired Bergman, we said, I would tell everybody, we do everything except architecture and MEP work. We do everything except those 2. But now that we acquired Bergman, we actually do everything. So we are a big E, little a firm.
Gotcha. That's great. Yeah. And I'm laughing a bit for those of you that don't know. I started my career at Mazer Consulting in, I think, 1996. And I think there were maybe 100 people or so. So it's amazing. I'm always laughing because every year you guys just keep growing and growing and growing. It's certainly something that is exciting to see. So let's talk a little bit about your career path. I mean, a lot of our listeners are civil engineering professionals. They aspire to be leaders in their companies. Mm-hmm. Talk to us a little bit about your path. I mean, you're CEO of a good sized firm. I don't know if that's something you always thought you'd want to do, but take us through your background.
Sure. So I started out in engineering at a college, went to college, got my bachelor's degree, started in engineering. I started out doing like water, wastewater treatment plant design. I worked for a company doing a lot of that work for 5-6 years, got more into the land, left that firm and got more involved in the land development. So for the most part, I'm a land development engineer. So my clients through most of my career were, the Walmarts, TD Bank, McDonald's, and all the national home builders like Haney and Lennar, Pulte. That's kind of where, from a technical perspective, where my career morphed over to. As I went through my career, I realized that although I thought I was a pretty good engineer, what I really enjoyed was more the people side of the business. So dealing with growing a business from a proposal, business development, kind of closing the deals perspective. and growing and hiring people. And so the business side of things was much more attractive to me than, sitting at the CAD station just doing design work, right? You kind of have two paths in this world. You're either a designer, you're more of a manager business type of person, and I just prefer the manager business type. And that's where my career kind of continued to keep flowering and getting better and getting bigger, is really that people side of the business and the sales side.
So for you, like general, and I agree with, I think, a lot of civil engineering professionals come to that fork in the road where you're either going to stay with the design, be that subject matter expert, or you're going to go on that managerial type path. And obviously for you, it was the managerial path. So in terms of like, CEO, high level executive, I mean, that's a big position in a company your size. Did you get to a point where you kind of said, like, I want to really go to that position where I can really, be a leader in that way? Or did you just keep doing your thing and just keep growing?
I knew for the most part, I kept doing my thing. I rewind 10 years from now. I mean, I joined Macer Consulting. Next month is 9 years. So I joined Macer Consulting 9 years ago to kind of be Richard Macer's transition to her successor, rather. So to take over for him, let him slow down a little bit, but help continue to keep growing and driving that business. At that time we were maybe 350 people, 300 people, something like that. I never anticipated, number one, being 1,900 people, let alone being the CEO of a 2,000 person company. So just kind of evolved that way. And I think really to get to this level, one of the biggest challenges anybody has is really the commitment, right? So the commitment you have to put in, the time and effort, is not just sitting at the designer's table, working till 10 o'clock at night. It's the same level of commitment, if not even more so, to get to the managerial side, because now you're dealing more with people and business issues and business challenges. And so it's really the success or the ability you have to deal with people and manage people and motivate people is really what allowed me to get to this point.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear you say that. I mean, obviously at EMI, we do a lot of training on people skills and people leadership. And when we started doing this maybe 12 years ago, it didn't seem as important, or at least companies weren't aware of how important it was as they are today. Like, we get way more calls today saying we need more people management skills in our company. I don't know, maybe that may be because, projects are getting more complex these days, a lot more mergers and acquisitions where there's a lot of integration of different people and people interaction. But I'm happy to hear you say that, because I think our listeners want to know what skills they need to become leaders. And it sounds like that people side of things is so critical. And so in terms of kind of your staff or your team members, if I asked them what your management style was, what would they tell me?
I think they would tell you that I am supportive, motivational, but also disciplined. So you could be supportive and motivational all you want, but if you don't show the leadership skills about holding your people accountable, and holding them to various standards that we all agree to getting to, doesn't make a difference how supportive and how motivational you are. If you're not being able to hold people accountable and being able to walk the walk in addition to talking the talk, it's not going to get there. So I would think people would think that, motivational, but yet I do hold people accountable, and you can't BS me. You're not going to snowball me. I know exactly what I'm doing from an engineering perspective, or at least be able to sniff out if something's not correct. And just, again, the management of the people, that ability to manage people by being able to have that balance between motivating them and supporting them, but yet really holding them to task when they need to get certain things done or follow certain rules or requirements and things. That balance is really what separates the leaders from the strong just managers, right? It's that ability to make that jump.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I mean, the reason that this show is called the Civil Engineering CEO, and obviously we interview CEOs that are civil engineers in their companies, and I think that that's important because of what you said. you need to have that accountability factor and knowing what people are working on, how these projects work, how these projects run, how the clients put the pressure on people. You have the ability to, I think, have those conversations with people and say to them, like, listen, I know this is a tough project, but we shouldn't be taking this long on something like this. There must be something going on here. And that I'm sure that that's really invaluable for you to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Kevin, obviously lots have gone on here in the last couple of years. We've had a pandemic. We've had an influx of a lot of work in the civil engineering world. There's lots of infrastructure work going on, lots of highs and lots of lows. How do you as a leader kind of handle those highs and lows and try to keep yourself, keep yourself confident, calm, and in the wake of everyone kind of, I guess, looking up to you? How do you ride that out?
So I guess everyone's emotional, right? I'm just as emotional as the next person, and some people are more emotional than others, right? So if you're having a bad day, you have a bad day. Everything's not great. So the key is to make sure that you rely on your support team. So like my COO, the CAO, my director of HR, us at the senior leadership level, we make sure we hear each other out. We vet each other out. We want to take somebody and shake them by the shoulders and, be like, what the hell did you do that for? Like whatever it needs to do. We run those things by each other to make sure that that the outward message, once we leave our closed door, that the message that we are sending to people is consistent, clear, concise, and measured, right? I know enough, I've learned throughout the years that I just can't have an emotion. I want to go outside and have a bad conversation with an individual. I've learned how to temper those things, how to think before you say things, how to poke each other's from a leadership perspective. I will send an email or I'll call up my COO or the CAO and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. This is what I want to say. Poke holes in it. Let me know, Is it good? Is it bad? Kevin, don't freaking say that. Like my HR person says, Kevin, don't say that. Don't say that. So it's really making sure that you recognize that everything you say as a leader, regardless whether you're the CEO or whatever, you're leader of your group.
Yep.
You may not, like from my perspective, I just think I'm Kevin. Whatever. I'm just a dude. I'm just a guy. I'm just Kevin.
Right.
But when you have to recognize that when people listen to you, they're just not listening to Kevin, they're listening to the CEO. And if I make some comment, it could be, or I may think it's a minimal thing, like what's the big deal? It could be devastating to the individual listening to that because of your role and responsibility. So having people in your close-knit leadership circle to be able to get you to recognize that from an outsider's perspective is key. It's really been key.
Yeah, that's great. And I agree with you. I mean, I think if it's a leader of a department with 10 people, right, it's just as important, all those 10 people are looking at you and thinking about you. And it sounds like having that team around you and having someone, and even if you are a manager of a group of 3 people in the firm, you still need someone you could bounce things off of from time to time. You still hopefully have another manager that you become colleagues with that you could say, hey, I want to bounce a couple things off of you, because I've felt the same way in my career. Now I maybe write an email and wait 30 minutes before I send it
absolutely.
and reread it.
Yep.
Learn from experience, but I do that now. But that's great stuff. So, all right, so let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about technology. The world of civil engineering is changing. There's different technologies and softwares coming out every day. How do you see technology kind of changing our industry, and how does Colliers, like, how do you stay on top of something like that?
So, given the fact that we can't find people, the people that we have want to keep making more and more money, right? So demand for talent requires you to spend more money or pay people more money. And the fact that our clientele, for the most part, are not willing to pay us more to do the same services, right? So you've got that squeeze. You got staffing costs coming up, so you're squeezing your profitability margins. The only way you're going to be able to stay at the top of your game is by improving efficiencies using technology. It's really the only, you have no choice. If you don't, you'll slowly die of paper cuts. It's just the way this world will work, right? So capitalizing on technology from even like the mobile LiDAR type of services, geospatial services, and then being able to have our civil engineers use that LiDAR data, be able to design roads using all the different technologies with MicroStation and AutoCAD, Civil 3D type stuff. The people who can get the best at it the quickest will outperform the competitors. The other thing is that we spend a lot of time on, we won't generate, we're not in the R&D world, we're not researching and developing new software and techniques. We make money by billing hours, right? You're not billing hours doing R&D work. However, we have invested in we have actual programmers in-house and actually a team of programmers that will enable us to take off-the-shelf type of products that we have from various different things and be able to program the ladder between those different programs to be able to allow us to capitalize on them better, faster, and easier than our competitors. That's kind of differentiator among companies in the future, in my perspective.
Yeah. No,
You've got large companies, right? Those big companies out there who are actually buying software companies. Right. You know, those big ginormous companies buying software companies that do just that. That's not our world, but similar.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, and it's really has to be a very fundamental thing that civil engineering companies do these days, like you said, because otherwise you're just dying a slow death because your costs are going up and clients aren't willing to just start paying more higher fees every year. So that's so it's good. And I guess having those developers and doing things like that can help you get faster, like you said. You know, everyone's going to get to the tech at some point, but if you can get it faster and learn it quicker and get your people up and running, then your profitability is going to be, I guess, bigger, faster, which is the name of the game.
Yep. It's a race. It's a technology race.
All right. So obviously technology, you know, we talked about it's a game changer. There's other shifts happening though, of course, and not just for civil engineering, but everyone with a lot more work from home, people working from home, working remotely over the last few years. You know, I mean, I remember just a few years back, you know, when I was practicing as a civil engineering, the idea of actually working from home was virtually impossible. And then of course, a couple of years ago, almost overnight, every civil engineering company became 100% remote. So that being said, talk about that a little bit from your seat in terms of the culture of the company, the cohesiveness of the company. How does a leadership team navigate that as we go through these times now and trying to keep people together when they're not physically together?
So it was a pretty good litmus test of our abilities to do that when COVID first hit, right? So like you said, overnight, everybody's working from home. And the evolution of how the work remote worked for us, actually, and keeping in mind the end result was 2020 was a record year for us. Revenue was up, profits were significantly up. So we learned a lot. We learned a lot, and at the end of the day, had a very strong outcome as a result of it. However, in the initial stages, everyone worked from home. We supported everybody, and utilization, work hours, and everything went up. People were working longer hours because they were working from home. I think a little bit was people a little bit concerned about their job, you know, so they were buckled down and they were really humping it. And so, but as the time goes on, we saw that kind of come back down to normalcy. The utilization, the hours being worked kind of came back down to normalcy. Again, still by working remotely, but I think that the comfort level of working remotely with the family impacts and things allow people to get a little bit of a better balance, you know, home life versus work life.
Sure.
So now fast forward, and as the company starts to grow or hiring new people, some of the disciplines that we have can hire remote workers, and there's very little interaction or camaraderie or mentorship that's needed. But most in an engineering world, there needs to be a lot of collaboration. There needs to be a lot of mentoring. And we saw, you know, kind of holes starting to develop in our business because we're hiring new people, bringing on new staff, but yet the lack of the lack of collaboration, the lack of mentorship, the one-on-one. Teams go so far, Zoom goes so far, but to sit across some table, even if you have to even wear masks, you're still better off sitting across the table and explain to the new engineers, why this grading plan doesn't work, or being able to sit alongside them on their certain design aspects and have that collaboration. So as we continue to keep morphing, I could tell you at CED, we will never be a back to the office 100% company, ever. I don't think most companies will ever do that.
Right.
In fact, if I said tomorrow, everyone's required to be back in the office full time, we probably would lose 30% of our staff because they'd be like, forget it, I'm not doing that. Because they've just got that personal balance, right? So we will never be 100% work in office company. However, what we are really now starting to see what the best machine that interworking is with that hybrid workplace is people being in the office for the most part, say 2 to 3 days a week. And the key is each group needs to make sure that they're in the office those same 2 to 3 days a week, right? Because what the heck good is it if you come in the office, but the rest of your team's not there, you might as well just stay at home because the whole purpose of the collaboration, the mentor-mentee type relationship isn't there. So that's where I think things will ultimately settle out. Some groups have already implemented that months and months and months ago. I think as we keep growing and hiring more and more people, I'll see that. That's where I kind of see everything, the water leveling out.
That's great.
2 to 3 day a week type of scenario.
Right, which is and the coordination is an important part of that. Coordinating people there on the right days and stuff like that. And that's great. And honestly, like my feeling on the civil engineering industry has always been that it's not an easy industry for a good work-life balance necessarily. You got planning board meetings at night, you got long projects you're working on. Sometimes you got to be in the field early, late. But I feel like this kind of blend is only helpful to that, like you suggested. Like, people do have a little bit more of that balance. So I kind of feel like it could be a really positive thing overall for the industry, as long as companies can ensure, like you said, that those holes don't pop up where you're not getting the mentoring that we used to get. You're not getting the, hey, come take a look at this real quick, I want to show you something type of thing. But it sounds like if you have a good balance of work versus in the office, home and in the office, then that can work out and maybe be better.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that's awesome. So obviously we have a lot of stuff going on with infrastructure. The bill, the funding, whatever happens with everything, there's going to be more and more infrastructure work. We know that, right? So how is that going to affect civil firms? Is that something that's going to be, do you think, just consistent over years? Do you think something's coming, a big thing's coming soon? Because it seems like to me, what would be, I don't want to say concerning, because I know work is a good thing, but again, growing with this kind of potential work that comes all of a sudden, and then fast growth of a company. How do you prepare for something like that? I'm sure you guys have been thinking about this.
So the key is diversification in our markets that we're in, right? So most people, when you say civil engineering, they're thinking more land development type of thing, right? So the key is to make sure that as an engineering firm, you are as balanced as you possibly can be. From my perspective, I think that inflation is going to continue to keep rising. I would expect land development outside of the housing market. I would expect land development opportunities outside of housing and industrial. I would expect every other part of the land development side of the world would start to slow down as inflation rises, right? However, I think the civil engineering companies that can diversify into the infrastructure side of things, utilities, roads, bridges, that type of market is where the success and where the long-term longevity is going to be. I can tell you from our perspective, we are very well balanced in, I'd say 60% of our business is more the infrastructure side of things, and 40% of it in the quote unquote land development side. And even in that land development side, like I said, it's heavily industrial, heavily multifamily, which I would continue to keep going in my opinion. regardless of what happens. So that diversification is key. So that's where people need to be hedging their bets, in my opinion.
And do you think that this, I mean, right now there's a hiring frenzy going on, obviously. I memean, everyone's can't keep up with hiring enough people. Do you see this as something that is a short-term thing, or do you think that this is what we're going to deal with for a while?
I think we're going to deal with this for a while. I was at a CEO conference. I saw a statistic by one economist who gave a presentation. They said that there will be, by the year 2025, we will be short 1.3 million engineers.
Oof.
So, and he related that to, people getting into the engineering environment. I think our industry as engineers in the curriculum, we're not selling engineering as being so sexy anymore, right? People who are good in math, engineering type of mindsets are going in more into the computer sciences and things. They're not getting into the engineering, because I don't think us as an industry are really selling the draw to that. So we need to do better as an overall industry to sell engineering to the kids in that STEM environment.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So yeah, I don't see it lightening up for the next few years at least. So,
yeah. That's what I figured you were going to say, but
yeah, which is unfortunate. Yeah, it's good for the employees. It's not very good for the employers.
Yeah, for sure. So another thing I wanted to ask you about is, obviously, diversity, equity, and inclusion is something that everyone's talking about these days. It's a really important topic in our world. I mean, everywhere, not just civil engineering. But can you talk a little bit about how DEI is viewed kind of at Colliers, what you guys are doing around that?
Sure. We actually, as of the beginning of the year, we've been working on for the last 6 or 8 months prior to through COVID, and then into the year 2021, developing our own D&I committee in the company. Like we have women's organizations, we have the associations committees, we have all these different green teams, we have all these other different committees to attack or to address certain other initiatives. We about a year ago started the initiative just strictly based on the D&I. It is, from a business perspective, statistics will show that turnover is lower. The more diverse an organization is, turnover is lower, business is better. And business culture is better. So it's key to the success of our organization. The challenge is in the engineering world, right? Is in our world. Back when I went to college, there was 3 females in the entire civil engineering curriculum, I think, back then. As we go over the years, though, I think it's gotten to be a lot better. But I think it's key for us to continue to keep maintaining as much diversity as possible, because it's for the overall health of the company, health of our people, health of our company. I think we are pretty far ahead of the game as it relates to our diversity compared to most engineering companies. I think part of that is because we have such a big geographical footprint that we can pull talent from various different geographies. But it's a challenge, and it's a focus of just about every AE firm that I know of. And it's a focus on the curriculum side through schools as well, to help promote STEM curriculum in lower middle class communities through. I mean, I'm on the board of a thing called Junior Achievement, right, where they do just that. They promote STEM, or STEAM now, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, right? Promoting STEAM in these lower social economic areas of the state of New Jersey, as an example. Junior Achievement's all over the country, but to help promote the knowledge and the exposure of the STEAM environment to more and more grade school and high school kids, because yeah, like I just said, there was 1.3 million less
Yeah.
engineers by the year 2025. So then we were going to fix that is by growing and developing more engineers now. So it's got to be a focus that we have. I personally am involved in that focus, but also just as an industry, we have to keep focusing on it.
Yeah, for sure. And I know CED has been, it's been something you guys have been working on for a while. I came there a couple of years back. I did a podcast interview there about the women's organization that you have going on there. We met with some people there. So I know you guys have been really focused on this for a long time, and it's good to see that that continues to grow. And there are great organizations out there. I mean, I'm looking to get involved myself with ACE Mentoring, which is an awesome program that gets out there into schools and tries to, match up working engineers with, students. And so we have to keep doing it. And it's glad to hear that you're focused on it. And I think it's something that's big for our industry going forward. All right, so switch gears a little bit. These are some questions, Kevin, that we get from civil engineers that, wish that they could ask someone in your seat. So I'm going to throw them out there to you. I think this first question you may have answered already, which is, what is the number one trait you feel is important for civil engineering professionals to have today? You did talk a lot about people skills before. I don't know if you would say that that's it, or if there's anything else you'd like to add to that.
I would say 2 traits: discipline and humility. I think those are key characteristics to be successful as an engineer, as a human being.
As a human being, yeah.
Especially as an engineer. Discipline and humility.
And discipline in a world of distractions gets very hard. So
yes. Even for myself, listen, that's why even through the pandemic, I came to the office just about every single day.
Yeah.
Because I work better with my stuff around me, my desk, my copier, all this type. I just work better that way. Outside of that, too many distractions.
Yeah, for
Dogs barking, people coming to the door, that kind of stuff. It's crazy.
It's crazy. All right. So another question that we get often, Kevin, is from civil engineers, working civil engineers. How can I make sure that I'm adding value to my organization? What would you say to someone that has that question?
I would say the value you provide. Well, the first thing is make sure that you can't equate the value to the organization to your title in the organization, right? Title means nothing. Somebody's value to an organization is based upon what the duties you perform, the skill sets you have, and your ability to not only just impact the bottom line, but grow other people. That's the value. So whether you're a design engineer, a project engineer, a project manager, whatever that title is, just because you have a higher title doesn't mean you're providing any more value than somebody else, right? So I tell people that all the time, especially with us, as we keep growing so much, people's titles are changing and stuff. I preach that all the time. Your title has nothing to do with your value. So if you want to recognize what your value is to the organization, ask your manager, what am I doing well? What can I improve upon? And when you go home every day, or you wake up the next morning, you should always be thinking, how do I increase my value to this company? Because it's my own personal value as well as my value to the company, right? Because we're all doing this. We're not doing this because it's just fun. We're doing this because we want to support ourselves and support our family and so on, right? So the value is what you can provide, which are tangible results. How well your projects are being, making profitability or increasing your revenue. There's tangible results, but don't minimize the intangible results by the mentoring of other individuals to improve their productivity. That's the real value of a person. So
that's great. Yeah. And I like that what you said earlier about, it's not the title. It's like you have job responsibilities. And if you're executing on them and you're successful, then obviously you're bringing value to your company. And I think sometimes where there's a mix up there is if the professional isn't clear on what the expectations of their job are, then they can't meet those expectations. So I often tell engineers, you have performance reviews. Hopefully you have a manager that you can walk into their office and sit down with them and say, hey, listen, what's expected of me over the next 12 months. And then you can kind of get a feel so you can hit them. There's nothing wrong with asking that question, because otherwise you might be to some degree kind of operating in the dark, and, you provide value by doing your job and doing it well. And I think the disconnect there is sometimes people aren't quite sure, what their job is. They're called a project manager, but that could be different things.
Exactly. And people sometimes, poor managers will call people certain things just to not have those tough conversations, to tell those individuals that, you don't have the skill sets to be called this, you don't have the skill sets to be called that. And all of a sudden, the person might be, say, a project manager, but he really should be a design engineer because he hasn't learned those skills, but yet he's been improperly managed and just given that title for the sake of having a title. So that reliance on title, I say there's no such thing as years of experience. There's no such thing as seniority. There's no such thing as age. I don't care about any of those three things. I care about what your capabilities are, period. Because if not, I wouldn't be the CEO of a company when I turned 50. I wouldn't be the CEO of a 1,000-person organization, right? So I have to, again, walk the walk. I don't care about years. I care about people's capabilities. So.
That's great. If one of your leaders in the company came to you and said, Kevin, what's one business challenge that I could solve for CED that would make the single biggest impact on our organization? What would you say to them?
Have engineers fall from the sky in the workforce.
I knew that was coming.
But I would say fix the mentality, or I should say fix, but help promote the mentality that success is through teamwork, that no one's on an island, that the communication among team members is probably more important than the communication between a project manager and external clients, right? Because you can't deliver to an external client if the communication and that teamwork isn't at the core, the foundation of your project management skills, or your team, or your production capabilities, right? So getting people to understand that it's not just one person, that it really is that team environment. And if you don't rely on your other team members, it ultimately will fail. It's probably the biggest thing, is to keep promoting that same mantra that it's teamwork, it's teamwork, it's teamwork.
Yeah, that's great. No, someone told me once that you can think of a team as like a machine, and if one part is not operating properly, the whole machine's not, like, all the parts need to be working, all the parts need to be moving together. And I think that that's a good way to think of it. Now, this next question, you might give me the same exact answer, but I'll ask it anyway. What are you most afraid of regarding the future of our industry?
Future of the industry, I would say, I don't have a concern of the future of our industry. I would have concern over, because our industry is going to continue to keep growing. It might be different avenues of engineering type things.
Right.
I think it'll be water, wastewater, energy, and infrastructure. Right? I think those are the four main markets segments that will go on forever.
Okay.
So I'm not concerned about that. I'm concerned about companies' ability, people's individual organizations, to be able to continue to keep adapting to those different things and not get so pigeonholed. And then so that's for the industry perspective. I could say that my biggest concern for CED is, as we continue to keep getting bigger, and we keep getting bigger, we keep growing, there are many, many firms out there, as they get bigger, they become more and more mediocre, right? Because as they get bigger, they don't integrate acquisitions, they don't mentor new strategic hires, and they get levels of mediocrity that get put into place. The concern is, and the mantra that I talk about all the time, is that at no point will we ever become mediocre. If we're a top quartile performing company as Mazer Consulting, which we always were, we will continue to keep being a top quartile performing company, regardless of what our size is. And that goes back to discipline, accountability, proper management. So industry I'm comfortable on. We got all our bases covered. I'm very comfortable with respect to how diversified we are. My focus is on making sure we don't become mediocre.
Yeah, that's great. And really, what you reminded me of a little bit there is a conversation I had with someone in a firm probably similar size to CED recently. They're in this growth mode as well, and they're acquiring companies. And like, one of the challenges is, like everyone else, they can't hire fast enough, which means everyone's busy and kind of everyone's leveraged to the max. and they're acquiring other companies, but in no way does that really help you solve the first problem, because usually these companies you're acquiring are just as busy as you, and they're all leveraged to the max. So you're just bringing on more people that are busy. So it is a point that goes to your point in that you can keep acquiring firms, you can keep growing, but at the end of the day, you have to integrate those firms. You have to, make sure that you are hiring enough people and keeping growing so that you can continue to do high quality work and, stay in kind of the upper echelon. It's not like, hey, we'll just acquire another company. We'll just, that'll just give us more capacity. It'll probably give you more busy people.
Yeah, exactly. You're not, acquisitions is not a solution for staffing shortages. That's for sure.
Right. So, all right, just a couple of last questions here and we'll wrap up. So one question I have for you, which is something I always think about in someone in your position, almost 2,000 people, you come to work every day. How do you decide what to work on?
So the answer is pretty simple. I have a to-do list, just like a project engineer and an engineer has a to-do list. My to-do list just deals with a lot more zeros typically, right? So I have a to-do list. I have things that need to be done by a certain time period. I have meetings scheduled, which lays things out for me every day. I think one of the keys is that everyone's going to have 130% things they need to do for 100% of your day, right? So continue to keep adjusting or modifying or evaluating the priorities of the things that's on your to-do list for the day is really what keeps successful. And then there's even times when all of a sudden I'll be like, I'll find myself being undisciplined, and I'll get away from my to-do list and I'll just have it all in my head. Then all of a sudden I go home and I'm like, oh my God, I forgot to do that. And then it only takes like one or two more times for me to do that. And I'll be like, okay, Kevin, get your act together, get back to doing your list, start writing this stuff down to make sure that you don't let anything fall through the cracks. So it's that constant evaluation. But I do my day-to-day list is just like everybody else's. So.
Goes back to what you said earlier, discipline, right? Everyone needs it. Everyone's got to be able to stay disciplined. So Kevin, do you have a favorite book over the years that you've read that stuck with you, like a leadership book or anything that stands out? No, just all.
Because I don't read.
Okay.
I really don't read books. I have a whole stack on my table over here. You can't see it from the meeting, from the video. It's probably a 3-foot stack of books that people have given me. And I just am not a reader, other than the stuff you have to read for work type things.
Right.
But I am not a reader. I really enjoy going to these CEO conferences, and I give a lot of presentations at these CEO conferences and things. But being in that environment when the CEOs, we sit around tables and we talk about different topics and ideas and what's worked and what didn't work, and that's how I've learned a lot of this stuff. Not that I don't read, but I'm not.
I know what you mean, though. But everyone likes to get their information, I think, in different sources and different mediums. And I think, and I like the idea of the conference with people in your positions is, I think, really valuable, because then you guys get to talk about different strategies that are all working around their companies, your company. So I think that's great. All right, last question I have for you. Are there any other CEOs in engineering world that you admire, that you are willing to mention, or someone that you've learned from, or a mentor?
I wouldn't say, limited to a couple of different people. I mean, I've had mentors growing up through my career.
True.
But from the CEO's perspective, virtually every CEO I've ever met, there's a certain level of admiration for all these people, because whether your company's a 50-person firm or a 5,000-person firm or a 70,000-person firm, for individuals to get to that level of success, it takes a special individual, right? And it's really, I admire anybody who actually can get to that level, to have for the people who start, for the founders of companies who lay everything on the line to start their own company, to leave their probably stable job and say, you know what, let's throw caution to the wind and I'm going to start my own company. Right. That takes a lot of confidence and a lot of stress, and to be able to have people that can do that, and not only grow their company to a 50-person firm, but then be able to grow that company to a 200-person firm, and so on, and then be able to recognize that you can't do it by yourself, and then find the right leaders to support yourself around you, and to rely on those leaders. It's truly remarkable. So and the one thing too is that at these CEO conferences, one thing that's really humbling is that regardless of your level, of how big your company is or whatever, the humility that I shouldn't say all, most CEOs have is really helpful and warming, because you'd be surprised, we are all willing to talk about everything we can think of to help each other's company grow and be better. As we keep growing, there's other CEOs that I talk to that are bigger than me and say, okay, guys, what works and what didn't work? When you guys went from 3,000 people to 5,000 people, right, what worked and what didn't work? And they'll say, Kevin, this worked really well, and by all means, I suggest not doing this because this didn't go over very well. So we are learning from each other, and that openness and that the willingness to help each other, I think because it's such a small group of CEOs in this world, right, and it's kind of lonely at the top a little bit, they always say, right? It really is sometimes, and to help each other is really warming. So I would suggest, no matter what level you are in management and leadership, is to surround yourself with other managers and leaders in other organizations to really help share stories and learn from each other to make us all better, because there's certainly enough work out there for everybody. So
yeah, that's for sure. Well, that's great, Kevin. I mean, thank you. It sounds like, again, the discipline, the humility, those are definitely running themes for you. And I heard them a lot through this entire conversation, and we appreciate your time here today. And that's why I started this show, Civil Engineering CEO, to talk to people that have reached that level in their careers, because I know the kind of, advice, kind of counseling, mentoring that you can give to people out there listening. So once again, Kevin Haney, President and CEO of Colliers Engineering and Design, formerly Mazer Consulting. Thanks so much for joining me, Kevin.
Thanks, Haney. It was a pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed our first episode of the Civil Engineering CEO. I really enjoyed the conversation with Kevin, and this show is about helping civil engineering professionals hear from the leaders in the industry. So what I'd ask you to do is, firstly, subscribe to our channel here to make sure you get all future episodes. And secondly, put your comments and your questions below, and I can ask them to the next CEO that I speak with. And we'll see you soon on the Civil Engineering CEO.